Tonight I want to talk about managing Lechuguilla Cave. I was at the park for 21 years as the cave specialist and had a lot of time to work with everybody as well as understand some of the past and hopefully guide the management of Lechuguilla Cave forward to today and past today. Tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about early management history, outside threats, comments on some science, the management considerations, and the significance of Lechuguilla Cave. I do want to apologize to everyone. I only have a few photos in my slideshow. It's mostly just words, but it's still a way to show and kind of give you a different perspective from all the talks that happened today and will happen tomorrow. Some of the talks have actually touched on a few things I'll touch on as well. So we'll get going. Thanks to Dave Bonnell for this first photo. There won't be too many more. Lechuguilla Cave is an incredible story of discovery. There have been hundreds of talented volunteers, many respected cave scientists, and support from all levels of the National Park Service in through the discovery and the management of the cave. We wouldn't know this story today without all this, everybody working together, basically. Lechuguilla itself, the word, is much like places words that denote other special places, such as Yellowstone, Yosemite, and Lechuguilla is up there amongst those names, and it denotes to be among the best of the best. So starting with some of the early management history, the land itself was managed by the General Land Office. It was federal land when they issued the 1914 mining claim for Bat Guano in Lechuguilla Cave. Not sure what they called it. I haven't ever seen the mining claim, but I don't know if it had a name on it even. In 1930, the land where Lechuguilla Cave was in the new expansion for Carlsbad Caverns National Park. Carlsbad Cave National Monument had been expanded on and created as a national park and actually went off eventually to 46,000 acres or so, something like that. And Lechuguilla was in that expansion land. It's kind of a interesting thing, some people did go to the cave at times from 1930 to into the 50s, but by the 50s, the cave was really being referred to as a misery hole. And it's my understanding it's because the trip to the cave and then going into the cave back in the 50s or earlier was pretty much misery, so that's why they called it a misery hole. Lechuguilla Cave was named after Lechuguilla Canyon. I know that came up earlier, and I talked to Ron Curbo about this, who had been the cave specialist before me, and he said that when he got to the cave, when he got to the park in around 1975, it was already named Lechuguilla Cave. So he wasn't sure who named it, but he was certain that it was named after the canyon itself, Lechuguilla Canyon. Moving along, 1978, 33,125 acres within Carlsbad Caverns National Park became a congressionally designated wilderness. That really made a difference with how the Park Service looked at it initially for some management issues, and it's good that it's been inside this designated wilderness. While airflow was noted in the 50s from trips there, it wasn't until the early 80s that cavers became much more interested in the airflow. And in 1984, permit was acquired to dig and explore any passages found. Now, the 1986, the success, what great success, the breakthrough occurred into one of the most incredible caves the world knows. Wow, that's amazing. So when this was happening, and soon after that, the park began to understand that it had a tiger by the tail. They were not prepared for such a major discovery. As exploration continued over the next year or two, discoveries came fast and furious, and exploration became the driving force for everything happening with Lechuguilla Cave, and it ran way ahead of NPS control or knowledge even. And they had a hard time actually getting basically even knowledge of what the cave was doing during those expeditions. And the current management plan at the time had mandated conservation protection protocols, but it certainly was not written for the current situation that the park found themselves in. It's not a bad situation to be in because it was such an incredible discovery. But the protocols and standards they had were not clearly defined. Though management did place some limits on what was happening with the cave. They certainly said no camping. You could have short bivouacs, and they placed a number on the number of cavers allowed in the cave at any one time. I think I heard 20 was the number earlier today. I'm not sure if that's exactly it, but it could have been. And so expeditions would show up for a week, and 90 people would show up. And then there would be people going into the cave round the clock, basically. A team would go in, stay for 24 hours or so, come out, and a team would go almost immediately right back in, keeping lots of things happening. During this time, the park was able to develop a plan just for Lechuguilla Cave. And one of the key things that came out of that is that they limited access to the cave. There would be no recreational caving, and going into it was only approved for scientific research, exploration when accompanied by survey, and certainly management-related trips to, do various things, including, taking care of ropes, all sorts of things like that. And that was a good move in the first step towards getting a little more control over what was happening in the cave. Through the 1980s, the cave specialist then was being pulled away to other NPS sites for cave management issues throughout that whole time of Lechuguilla really breaking open and people being in the park. And a lot of times he wasn't. So by January 1991, the cave specialist, Ron Kerbo, moved to the Southwest Regional Office as a regional/national cave specialist. He was working in many parks. There was obviously a need for cave management across the board throughout the National Park Service at that time. And so after he had left, by March 1991, as we heard from Emily this morning, a major accident had happened in Lechuguilla Cave. It made the national news, cost the Park Service about $250,000, and involved a couple hundred different cavers and cave rescue personnel. It was quite a deal. I remember it. I was not there. I was off doing some caving things, I think, since that was March 1990, in March when a lot of things go happening for school breaks and stuff. So July 91 came around, and the new cave specialist reported for duty. That would be me. And instantly I was tossed into the middle of everything that was going on. And it wasn't just Lechuguilla Cave, it was Carlsbad Cavern, it was the entire park. Pretty exciting stuff. What a great time to be there. Soon after I was in the park, in August, a survey expedition occurred for Lechuguilla Cave, and 75 participants showed up for the week-long event. It was, I remember at the time thinking, wow, this is really a pretty much a chaos in a lot of ways, and I'm certain that the superintendent at the time was thinking the same thing. He did mention that to me, that it'd be nice to kind of change how things are happening. And so over time, looking at the situation, we were able to implement a number of changes, but it took a while. I think I would say it took us easily 10 years to make it where the survey teams were not the ones running the cave, but it was the park itself. And that's not to say bad things about the teams going in the cave. It was more there was no guidelines to kind of protect the cave and get everything we felt we needed out, because by letting people into the cave, it was damaging the cave, and so we needed as much possible out of the cave as we could, or from the cavers themselves. So by 1993, survey standards were developed, placing sketchers as team leaders, and there was a lot of things the sketchers were required to do, provide the best surveys they could. We gave lots of instructions on what we needed. And we had also started reviewing survey notes and making sure that we were getting the best we could get from people. And there was certainly some pushback on a lot of different things like that. By 1993, I think, or maybe it was 94, camping was allowed in the cave, which changed how the survey expeditions were run. We had limited numbers of people on trips to 20 on a trip, and that's it, not 90 showing up and everybody going in at the same time or on different times. So we ended up having 20 people show up for trips instead of the larger numbers. By 1996, a new cave management plan for park caves was implemented that included Lechuguilla Cave, and it defined new standards and guidelines. I know that one of the things that was discussed earlier was the pools of water, and why some things were off limits, and it was hard to get permission to go across things like Lake Okeechobee. I know that when I got to the cave or the park, and by 1993, 94, if you looked at all the different pools that were discovered in the cave, there had been people in those pools for the most part. Any good-sized pool had people swimming in it or getting into it to push it past the limits and stuff like that. And at the same time, we had microbiologists telling us that the pools were extremely unique and delicate, and we shouldn't be, getting people into them. So we changed how we treated things. We closed off a lot of areas to people just going there. Certainly, if you get a permit to go, if you had a reason to be into the areas that were closed. But we changed a lot of ways that we were doing things. The park took over survey data management. During the same time, we issued expectations that were set as guidelines for entering Lechuguilla Cave. Responsibilities were placed on everybody entering the cave, the individuals, the team leaders, and expedition leaders. We wanted the cave to be taken care of. Conservation standards were developed, encouraging minimal caving techniques. Tread lightly wherever you go. Don't go places off the trails that you don't need to be going to. You just want to go see. Please don't do that, because impact the floors every time you do that. All these changes, you know, were in support of protecting the cave. The cave was what an incredible resource. A lot of people in this call have been there, and we were following our 4 basic goals: be safe, take care of yourself and the others, take very good care of the resources, and then accomplish your task and provide the best high-quality work you can. The 4th one is always having fun, but that's a given anyway. And I was really, really happy to hear James Hunter's talk this morning or this afternoon, whenever he was talking, because he repeated these same things, and we've been saying this since about 1995, that these are the 3 things. Okay, you come first, and the people with you come first. Resources come second, and the task that you're appointed to is next. Now, with current management strategies, very few changes have happened since the early 2000s that I'm aware of. Now, it may be that there's been some and I'm not aware of them, and then Rod can hopefully put out a chat issue thing, a chat there to let us know that there's other things that are, you know, maybe significant that have been changed. But it really made a change in how the park controlled the chaos, basically, that was going on early on. And that, as I mentioned, you know, the tiger was by the tail, and nobody likes to hold a tiger by the tail. So in the meantime, major discoveries continue to be made. What an amazing thing. It's a big cave. The park is doing a few things different now. It's asking volunteers to do more. And hopefully they'll have another 1 or 2 people hired for the Cave Resources Office, and they can help out a lot too. But asking for volunteers to do more, it presents a great opportunity for cavers to help out where they can, particularly those who may be interested in getting into the cave but haven't gotten to yet. Get to know your cave resource people, get to know your trip leaders and others going into the cave, and learn your skills. That way, when everybody knows you and knows what you can do, it's much easier to get into the cave that way. And you know, it continues to be a privilege to work in that cave. There's so much there. It's such an incredible resource, and we're happy that everybody puts in all the hard work to do that. It's just amazing. So let's see. So for those who haven't seen the 2006 Cave and Karst Management Plan, this is still the plan the park uses for basically managing the caves of the park. And it has all the different guidelines. It has the survey standards, and it can be found on the park website. It's kind of a hard, long website to follow there, but you can take a picture of it and try to find it, or if you can just go to the website and look around, you'll eventually find this plan. But if you can download it, it's a really good source for everything that's kind of going on with Lechuguilla Cave today. And that just kind of adds to Carlsbad Cavern for many years, ever since Ron Curbo came in as the cave specialist in 1975. They started doing cave management plans. This is like the 4th or 5th one, maybe more. And across the country, whenever I came in, starting in 91, I would get calls and emails from lots of different places asking for copies of the current cave management plan. And so Carlsbad Cavern and basically the whole area in the Guadalupe Mountain area as the Forest Service, the BLM, have all been, kind of on the leading edge of cave management in its current form. So moving to a different little take here, the outside threats. There was two different threats really as the Lechuguilla was being found to be such a big cave that really came up. First one here, the local business community started to talk about commercial opportunities. And I mean, you can see why there was such great new finds, the Western Bullet Hole, Chandler Ballroom. I mean, it was, they were starting to dream of dollars for that could help out from, bringing money into the community. From the park side, that equated to concerns that the community would push to eliminate wilderness designation. And it also, it would require blasting new 1,000-foot deep elevators, paving trails, installing electrical system, blasting tunnels between the places that are really nice to visit. Be a pretty hard sell, really. Be hard to do all this kind of stuff. So in 1992, the National Park Service brought in nationally recognized cave developers, took them into the cave, and showed them what was going on, discussed the situation, and then these developers, through meetings, discussed their findings with the business community and convinced them that commercialization was definitely not viable. And not only was it not viable monetarily, it would destroy the beauty of these areas that they would commercialize. And that pretty much gave them the opportunity to drop those discussions, though I'm sure they would have liked that. But anyway, that kind of went away as a threat. The next, here I have another picture, so that's pretty exciting. It's not in the cave, but just to the north of the cave. The next threat, certainly oil and gas drilling, coming in closer and closer to the northern boundary of the park. There are portions of the cave only something like 800 feet from the northern boundary. And so Jim Goodbar is going to talk tomorrow about the helium study, and I'm sure he'll mention these oil and gas rigs that are right here as well. But BLM are permitting wells closer and closer. I remember sitting in my office one day and I could see a drilling rig on the ridge just 2 miles away from where I was standing or sitting. That was pretty sad. And their targets in the northern part of there's a number of targets, but the main targets for the companies were high pressure gas found deep below the carbonate areas, and that presented a lot of potential problems with all the fractures, with all the open spaces in the limestone areas. We certainly didn't need high pressure gas blowing out into a cave, particularly Lechuguilla or even Carlsbad Cavern. And some of those, like those two you saw in that picture there, the drilling rigs, when they were drilling those, hit numerous voids. And one was known to have pumped concrete into for days and never really filled it up. So somewhere on BLM land over there, there's a cave that has a big passage in it that has a drill stem coming down and a big pile of concrete under it. Well, we need to go find that. But nevertheless, in 91, an application for permit to drill on BLM land was for an area right only a half mile from the park and a mile from passages in Lechuguilla Cave. That triggered the Dark Canyon Environmental Impact Statement. And from that, several studies were initiated, a liniment study for the area north of the park as well as part of the park. a natural potential study, and helium study. On the park, we were pushed exploration survey concentrated on passages that may be trending towards the BLM. The Park Service in general, we're trying to come up with all sorts of ways to protect Lechuguilla Cave. They already knew it was such a spectacular find. So in 1993, the report of the Guadalupe Caverns Geology Panel to the National Park Service basically laid the groundwork for establishing a cave protection zone north of the park. And that also became part of the Lechuguilla Cave Protection Act of 1993, which was passed through the U.S. Congress. And that withdrew a large area of federal lands north of the park for mining, mineral leasing, and established a 6,280-acre cave protection zone. It also tied everything from the Dark Canyon EIS, the Record of Decision, to the act itself. And so when the Record of Decision came out, the study that it withdrew the study area that was within that Dark Canyon EIS from all future oil and gas leasing. In 2000, the BLM also withdrew an even larger area more to the north and more to the towards the east, towards Carlsbad, from any future oil and gas leasing as well. That was a big win for Lechuguilla Cave and Carlsbad Caverns National Park. But there's other things that the park NPS were looking for to add more layers of protection for Lechuguilla Cave in case some didn't happen, like the Congress passing the act. In 1995, through these efforts in 1995, Carlsbad Caverns National Park was inscribed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And that's a pretty big deal, as I've mentioned. One thing that wasn't really as considered by probably many people, but there had been talk of a National Cave and Karst Research Institute since probably before I arrived at the park. And the idea of this gave the local business community something to kind of latch onto and move forward. And this is exactly what they did. The local business community worked with the New Mexico congressmen and senators, and were able to pass this particular act, creating the institute in Carlsbad, New Mexico. And it kind of changed the way the city, at least, was thinking about making money from Lechuguilla Cave. So that's kind of all I have for that. It's a lot of history. There's a lot of things happening, a lot of things going on. But the good news is that Lechuguilla is hopefully protected far better than it would have been had the oil and gas business not been stopped. I wanted to mention just a little bit about safety, because that's the key. That's the key for anybody doing anything in caves in the park. It's always the primary goal, and everybody is responsible for themselves and for the others that they're with. And as mentioned in a different talk, always pay attention when traveling the cave. Clip into all safety ropes when on traverses. There's actually been 1 or 2 falls that occurred when the people didn't feel like they needed to. I was really happy to hear Andy Armstrong's talk tonight, or today. And that should be, that particular talk should be watched by everybody going into caves in general, and certainly anybody going into caves on any of the national parks. He did a great job, and I was glad to really hear a lot of the things that were going on about self-rescue, small teams, and well, it made me glad to hear what was going on. And I had also put on there, the rescue plans, which were also discussed by James Hunter a little bit, I think a little earlier. One of the things that the park was really struggling with, at least in my time there, was with limited access and the vast majority of the public could not ever go into the Lechuguilla Cave. How do you provide knowledge of the cave to the public? And certainly there were some ways that were working well in the scientific community. Science seminars, meetings were being presented and highlighting scientific research. Certainly the caving community across the world already knew about the cave. And also photography. When it advances park goals, it's helped produce images that people see all the time in various places. And it was decided that high profile films and videos would certainly be a good way to get the message out to a lot of viewers. The BBC Planet Earth series is a good example where we worked very closely with the teams that came in from the BBC. They did it the right way. They started 2 years ahead of time, and they did a great job with the filming and I've seen the number of 100 million viewers with the cave portion of that series, which certainly introduced Lechuguilla to a lot of people around the world. There's still, it's always a need to balance us going into the cave to do work versus just the general public knowing what's going on and how to portray that to them. Just a little bit about science. As soon as the cave was discovered, there were already science-related trips starting to go into the cave because it was a pretty amazing thing. I think the discoveries of native sulfur certainly piqued a lot of interest and led to a lot of work determining a new method of cave formation. Microbial studies certainly were some of the first completed in caves, as we heard earlier today as well. People thought the cave was pretty much devoid of life below Boulder Falls. And in many caves around the world, people just never thought that caves were filled with lots and lots of microbes. And certainly some of the studies that were started in Lechuguilla Cave were some of the first to ever been completed in caves. And there's been a lot more done since then, but Lechuguilla was kind of on that cusp. We did have a mineral survey completed for part of the cave. That was done over a period of a few years and really produced some really interesting results. And since that time, the National Park Service has had benefit sharing contracts across the country in various places, and Carlsbad Caverns National Park has entered into some of these benefit sharing contracts for commercial profits of anything that may come out of Lechuguilla that are other park caves that are making a lot of money up from. A little bit more about science. It's important for everybody to understand that exploration, when accompanied by physical surveys and inventory, is the first basic steps of science. We can't do the other science without knowledge of things that are there and where they are located physically in the cave. And that's why we have to do these kind of things. The cave, Lechuguilla Cave, needs to be completely and carefully documented and studied over the next however many years. important discoveries continue to be made, and scientific studies will continue to follow these discoveries. I think we saw earlier that Hazel Barton would like to go to look at the things that are being found there in the far east. So hopefully that'll happen. That needs to happen. So Lechuguilla Cave is on the leading edge of scientific endeavors in a number of fields, and we need to continue that. So with some management considerations, most of the work in the cave is by volunteers or is already funded through university grants. The park gets a lot of free labor, basically, and free studies, and that's a great value to the park and to mankind in general. So we need to continue to allow the survey teams and inventory teams in the cave. We need to keep that continuity over time. We need to encourage new participants to take up the reign, because it gets harder and harder for everybody going in the cave over the years. We need to encourage new scientific studies and expand the field of studies. There's so many ways that we can move into new realms. And one thing I'd really like to make sure that is said is that we need to keep National Park Service employees active in the cave. Certainly employees from Carlsbad Caverns National Park, but consider qualified personnel for work details from other parks or other agencies. Even there's a great cadre of people out there that work in Park Service and Forest Service, BLM, and other agencies and organizations that could really benefit from coming there to work. So, getting close to the end, just talk a little bit about the significance of Lechuguilla Cave. It's a very rare modern day discovery of one of the world's greatest caves. It's quite amazing that caves like this can be found, and modern day people are the first people there. Caves like Carlsbad Caverns have had easily over 100 years of people doing all sorts of things in it. Mammoth Cave has had over 200 years. And so when you get a cave like Lechuguilla that's, in a place that is not being impacted by human impacts, it's quite a rare thing. So what makes Lechuguilla Cave great? Everything we've seen today, its length, complexity, how the caves formed, the mineralization, the microbial communities, and the fact that the cave was unknown and pristine until today, or this earlier in 30 years ago or 34 years ago. And so even after 34 years, major discoveries still occur on a regular basis. And how about the large rooms, the large areas, the dripstone, flowstone columns, the chandelier ballroom? The cave is in a protected area. It's in designated wilderness. It's a perfect cave laboratory. And I think it's really one of the most telling things is that only after 9 years after the breakthrough happened, the world science and management communities concluded that the cave and the park deserved recognition as a World Heritage Site. I think that tells so much about its value, because that's not a very long period of time when it comes to cave discoveries, and that just is a very telling thing that it's among the best of the best. and that's worldwide. I guess that's all I really have. I'll be glad to answer questions if there's time. I'm not even sure how long I got tonight, but.
Thank you, Dale. We didn't have a specific ending time. I think we should
okay.
I think we should be cognizant of everybody having spent a very long day doing this. Pat, did you compile the questions, or was that my job tonight?
I can do some of this. So Dale, there's been a lot of discussion in the chat thing about the well that you mentioned, the 5 days of dumping pea gravel and stuff. Can you elaborate a little more on it? And will we be able to use it as an entrance into whatever cave this is?
Okay, I guess I'm not hearing you very well, Pat. You're coming across very staticky.
Right,
I can hear Hazel quite well, but
is this better?
yeah, repeat the question, please.
There was a lot on the chat about the well that had 5 days, the oil or gas well that had 5 days of pea gravel and cement. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Is there a chance it's a backdoor into Lechuguilla? And will we be able to make use of the drill line to access the cave?
Well, you know, those are all good questions. My assumption is that the land's on BLM land. I think that, you know, those wells, if they were not producing, they would be filled to avoid any kind of leaks into any kind of fractures or anything like that, because that is pretty serious drilling rig and drilling well guidelines, and so I would doubt very seriously if they would entertain making the well bore bigger and letting people into it. But I think those are probably good questions for Jim Goodbar tomorrow. I'm sure he can answer those a little better than I can.
Dale, can I ask you a question? There's a lot of people on here right now, and some of them might be interested in following similar career paths that you've taken as far as resource protection and working with caves in the Park Service. Do you have any recommendations for people who are maybe interested in that as a career?
Sure. You know, one of the first things I would always tell people when I first got the job is that you know, I was well qualified. I knew a lot of the people involved. I knew vertical work. I knew how to work with large expedition caving type stuff, but I was willing to accept the least amount of money for that. So that's just part of it. I think it goes to kind of what I was saying about when I was talking about the volunteer thing. I had a lot of people when I was at Carlsbad, you know, that would call and want to know how they can get into doing all these different things that I've gotten to do. And believe me, it's been quite an amazing you know, time travel, you know, for me through the cave management stuff and caving in general, is, you know, have an area that you might like and get to know those cave managers, get to know the people that are working there, get to know volunteer and do things, because that's the only way those different people get to know your skills and your ability to work with others and everything like that. And that's, for me, the best route into anything that best way to get into it. Now, it means you stay you know, after you've been a student a while, you move into the next realm of still being poor, but you get the experience backed up behind you by doing a lot of volunteer work and by doing things for groups of cave managers and then you're, I think you stand a better chance of getting into those kinds of things by putting that type of effort into it. Most people are not just going to fall into things. Now, while I kind of fell into this job, I was, I spent 20 years before that being prepared for it and getting into the right places and knowing all the right people. One of the things the superintendent told me when he hired me is that I had all the great credentials. I could do all these different things. I knew all the people or a lot of the people involved. And on the main difference being I had never worked in Lechuguilla Cave. And he wanted fresh eyes on that kind of thing. So I kind of fell into that. Sometimes I think, well, that was good, and sometimes it was bad, but I still think getting everything behind you, volunteer-wise, getting your skills up, take these SAR training classes that Andy talked about earlier, get all that kind of skills, because those are the ones that are being used today. Does that kind of answer that question? And
it does, and perhaps I can, based on what you said, ask you a follow-up question, and that would be, taking on this position, what was, and you alluded to it to some extent, but what was the one thing that you expected the least, and what was the one thing that you anticipated the most that you were correct on?
Those are good questions. Anticipated the least. I had done a lot of things, but I had never really been a cave manager. And I think the things I expected least coming into the situation I came into, and it's not just Lechuguilla Cave, it was employees at the park, it was Carlsbad Caverns things, and just the local community. There was a lot of, one person in particular, say at the park, that worked at the park, started doing things immediately to disrupt and make my career move not a good one. And I was just not expecting that, and I never even understood what was going on for a year or two. So I was really surprised when, we've got all these great resources and there's all this, and maybe it shouldn't have been such a big surprise, but politics played a big role everywhere, and I was somewhat prepared, but not prepared for the extent it was. That was the unfortunate part of that. What was the other part?
The thing that you anticipated the most that ended up being correct.
Well,
maybe you answered it with the politics.
Yeah, I think maybe it's both. It was the same thing. I knew that there would be politics. There's always been politics with caving, particularly big caves. Caving in Mexico a lot, it was, the common saying was big time caving is big time pain. And that's both physically and mentally, because there's a lot of politics involved. And so I think that probably goes for both of them. Yeah, I'd say. Okay,
so one last question and then we'll wrap this up.
Okay.
You were at Carlsbad for many years. Do you have one thing that you accomplished that you really feel is like, a legacy or something that you really felt proud of accomplishing while you were in the position related to Lechuguilla?
Well, yeah, I certainly, while there was a lot of politics and pain associated, implementing the survey standards, the guidelines for entering caves, the conservation standards that people weren't used to, particularly in Lechuguilla Cave. I think it changed the direction of the work going on in the cave, and to me it has made a big difference in everything dealing with the cave. And I think it even showed up with when Andy Armstrong showed that little graph of okay, here were the number of accidents reported in Lechuguilla the first few years before I was there, and it went down from there because we got a better handle on a lot of things. And it's not to say that everybody is bad or anything like that. It's more that was what they were used to, and the changes we made were for making everybody safer, protecting that cave, and getting high quality information out of it. And that's one of my things that I think helped accomplish the most, and I'm very proud of that.
Thanks, Dale. Pat, do you want to wrap it up? Oh, and remind everybody about the event tomorrow.
Right. So Dale, one of the things, when people think of Lechuguilla Cave, they not only think of exploration and science and conservation, and it's been a big impact on numerous cavers, both directly and indirectly. But what do you think the biggest contribution that the exploration, physical exploration and scientific exploration of Lechuguilla Cave has made to the public in regards to caves in general?
Oh, that's a hard one. Certainly, that's going to be a hard one to answer in that format, at least. I think the general public is aware now that this cave exists. I think a lot of people do. I think there's a lot that don't. A lot of times when I'm around different groups of people here where I live in the Denver area, some people will have heard of Lechuguilla Cave, and some people hadn't. If I'm talking to them about what I used to do, and I think one of the big things is, and it's like the entire community, not just with Lechuguilla Cave, but with Carlsbad Cavern, with all the big cave systems and with all the karst things that are going on. I think the whole group of cave scientists, karst scientists, the surveyors, I think in the long run we're making, and Lechuguilla is part of that, of course, making headway into how people perceive caves and karst areas. We've got a long ways to go, but I think I'm hopeful for the future, and I think we've made a big change, or at least idea of these types of things. And of course, the National Cave and Karst Research Institute this coming year, with the World Organization, is it's the year of karst and caves and karst. So I think we're moving in the right direction. I think it's directly Lechuguilla has led to a lot of things that is helping that move in the right direction for the general public and for the world. So, well, that's the best I can do, I guess. So.
That was great, Dale. Thanks a lot. Thanks for hanging in with us and getting you up and running. And thanks very much for participating tonight as the keynote speaker. Everyone, we'd love to have you show up tomorrow for science and exploration, or science side of Lechuguilla Cave. It starts at 0900 Mountain Time, and it's never too late to sign up and hop on in. So with that, we'll say goodnight and happy caving.